The easiest way to start is by writing the copy quote unquote straight. Like write your emotion backed, research backed copy the way that you normally would. And then read it out loud and pretend that you're talking to a friend and like converse with the copy. See if you have any impulses to like, make a joke or like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge aside.
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Leanna Patch. If you don't know who Leanna is, she is a conversion copywriter and comedian. She's the founder of Punchline Conversion Copywriting, a consultancy for software and e-commerce businesses, and her course is called Conversion Comedy. Leanna, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I am pumped. Happy
I'm
to be
super
here.
excited that you're here. We're going to talk about embracing humor in your writing. Yes, you heard that right, humor. And trust me, if you don't feel funny or whatever, it's okay. We're going to talk it through. You're not alone. I feel that way as well. So before we get started, Leanna, I want to hear your story. How'd you get into marketing? How'd you get into copywriting? Start wherever you want to start.
It's kind of cliche, but I'm pretty sure I was in college and Mad Men was coming out, and I saw Mad Men and I was like, is this why I like ads? Is this why I've always paid attention to ads? And I was dating this guy at the time, and I was like, I wonder if I could have a career in this. He was like, just do it, babe. Just be a copywriter. And so I just opened a copywriting business on Craigslist, charging like $15 an hour.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
How'd
It
it
was
go?
like 2008, I think.
And how did that go?
Boy, it was interesting for a while. It was a great chance to like be a generalist. I wrote a HVAC repair manual at one point. Could I
Wow.
repair an HVAC? No, but I
That
wrote the
doesn't
manual.
sound like copywriting. That sounds like good old fashioned, like, oh gosh, I used to work in an environment where people were writing manuals and stuff. That is not fun. Well,
Yeah, no, it was good old fashioned. If you have money to write things, I will take your money and write those things.
so how did that evolve over time?
I ended up doing something I was very good at, but realized I didn't enjoy, which was copy editing. And then eventually I started doing content editing for magazines and other publications. And so about 7 years later, I looked at all of my work and I was like, okay, I'm editing a bunch of magazines and I'm holding my breath when I sit down to work. And that seems bad. So maybe I hate this. And I quit and I went to work for a client of mine at an agency, and I very quickly realized I don't respect this person. And if I worked this hard at my own business, I would be doing great. And so I quit, I rebranded, I launched Punchline Copy in 2016.
Well, and tell me what was that journey like in the beginning when you launched it? You know, I mean, like obviously it's one thing to go from Craigslist to getting random customers to working for various different companies and not really enjoying it. And it's another thing to go off on your own. How did that work
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I was used to being on my own, but I wasn't sure that anybody would buy like funny copy.
Mm.
And I was doing improv and stand up at the time, and I was working with a great mentor, Joanna Wiebe, and I was like, I wish I could just combine comedy and copy. And she was like, well, why not? Why don't you just do it? And I was like, wow, permission. And now permission is like a big part of my business, like giving you permission to try being funny. Yeah. So I just sort of stair stepped my way into clients who were looking for that kind of stuff, just like lost a couple retainers here and there, didn't repeat projects with certain people. And then eventually all my clients were people who were looking for fun stuff.
So how did the comedy work its way into your storyline? Because I think that's an interesting question to ask.
I was getting really tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't on the internet. Like I had two Twitter profiles. One was for my business and one was for me as a person. And whenever I would get any traction, it was for me as a person. And I was like, I don't think I have the energy to be two separate people on the internet anymore, especially in emails to clients. Where you're like, dear sir and or madam, would you like some copywriting services? And like, no, nobody wants to work with that person. Everyone wants to work with the person who's fun and easygoing and like you look forward to opening their emails, right? And so I think it was part like exhaustion at masking all the time, and then part just real nerdy interest in the overlap between the structures of comedy and the structures of copywriting.
Did you go to school to learn comedy? How did you pick up? Did you find you were naturally funny?
I went to an open mic in 2012, I think. And this is a really mean thing to say, but I was like, oh, is that it? I could do better than that, which, I'm very competitive in some ways. And so I just started writing jokes and getting up on stage. And then I took improv classes. And I think everyone should take improv. It is just so much fun.
So bring us up to where you are today. Today, like so far on the journey, here's what we know. You started on Craigslist and then ultimately ended up starting your own business, uh, obviously working comedy into this, and you've got some experience and background as a comic, stand-up and improv. So like, where are you today now with the business?
These days, I'm working with mostly bootstrapped software founders and e commerce stores. I write a lot of websites and product pages, email sequences, and I'm really trying to help people figure out what could be funny about their brand and how can we bring more joy and delight into the brand in a way that feels authentic and not like something you would have me on deck all the time to do.
Behind, for those that are not watching the video of this podcast, behind Leanna is a rubber chicken kind of up on the wall, standing at attention. Just a little visual effect there. So marketers that are listening right now, many of us do not self-identify as comics or comedians.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is, why should marketers focus on humor? What is the upside if they were to go down this path with us today?
Yeah, I had the same question mostly because I felt like an imposter when I started. I was like, I have to do a bunch of research and figure out the psychological reasons behind using humor. And it turns out there are so many. Humor psychology is an enormous field that's been around for like 100 years, if not more.
Hmm.
And it turns out that not only does humor make us feel good and activate the centers of fulfillment and enjoyment in our brain, like the same way that, having an ice cream would. It actually boosts information recall. So if you hear a piece of information and there's a joke either before or after it, you're more likely to remember that information. It obviously creates a better rapport with your readers. So especially in the times when you have to break bad news, if you already have that relationship, people are more likely to forgive you. And if you can use humor to break the bad news in a way that helps it land more easily. So there's so many actual reasons. There's so many like cognitive, social, emotional benefits of using humor as a means of connection. And we sometimes miss it because it feels scary.
Do you find that your clients and or students or whoever you work with that you're teaching how to use humor, do you find that it actually results not just in the psychological benefits of making them feel good and building recall, but do you also find that it actually converts better?
Oh, yeah. I have a bunch of client results, luckily for me. Sometimes I forget to ask. I'm just like so jazzed to deliver the copy and then I forget to check back in. But I have worked with several e commerce stores that measured results. There was one, they wanted to be the Dollar Shave Club of engagement rings and wedding rings.
Hmm.
And they had,
Whoa.
they had a product page and it was converting fine, but we wrote some funny product copy and we didn't change anything else. And we saw both add to cart conversions and purchase conversions go up to the tune of like 98% purchase conversions on one ring,
Wow.
and 20 on another, but 200% add to carts. So like tons of evidence that it works, especially, and this is surprising to people, when they have a quote unquote boring or technical brand.
Yeah, and that is really interesting because we're gonna address some of that in my next question. There's a lot of people listening right now, and hopefully they're still with us, and they're saying to themselves, "Hey, comedy is not going to work for me
Yeah.
because I work for the most boring company, or I have the most boring clients." So, is comedy for everyone? And if so, why? Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's break it down.
I think comedy is for mostly everyone. I once got this question. Someone raised their hand at a conference and said, I work in the funeral industry. And the whole room just exploded, right? And I was like, oh my God, did someone plant you here? Can this be for real? But even in the funeral industry, I've seen humor work. I saw an ad in a magazine once. I think it was a British magazine that had basically an older woman in a wheelbarrow. And it was like, you're dead. You don't need all the bells and whistles. Like, oh my God, that's
Yeah.
not for everyone, right? But that is really for who it's for.
Right.
And so when people say, like, it's not for me, I think it's mostly coming from fear of trying and fear of falling on your face or, being the butt of the joke yourself, or fear of offending, which is a big deal, right? If we're using marketing to get sales, we need that revenue. We can't offend our customers. And so having some guardrails in place and understanding why you're doing what you're doing is really helpful if you're just getting started.
So let's explore a little bit of these fears. I don't want to offend anybody, or I don't think I'm funny. I mean, like, just let's
Yeah.
just talk about like how do we overcome some of that?
I hear a lot, I'm not a funny person. And I usually say everybody is a little bit funny. Some people are more naturally funny than others, but most people just have never thought about it. They think of humor as something that they receive. Like
Mm.
it's to be entertained, but they've never given thought to what their personal brand of humor might be or what even resonates with them. Like you gravitate to certain comedians or shows. Why is that? What do those things have in common? That is probably a natural place for you to start experimenting.
Okay, so what I would love to do is I want to give some examples because you addressed that there's some non-traditional. A lot of people might think that they can't have humor. We already talked about the funeral home example,
Yeah.
but when you and I were prepping, we talked about a couple other examples.
Yeah.
So let's explore those examples just so people can understand that you can apply this in the most crazy, industries, if you will.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite things to talk about, especially recently. I hear a lot from quote unquote boring brands or technical brands that like humor has no place in our industry. And why wouldn't you want to be the one brand in your industry that is trying humor? It would be so easy. Like the bar is on the floor, right? You could just step one step above it, make a little bit of a joke, and you would immediately be more memorable than your competitors. I worked with a stormwater compliance monitoring software. They're now an environmental compliance monitoring platform. They've
Okay.
expanded. But at the time, they were literally helping people measure like rainfall, and how much pollutant is in the rainfall. And what a snooze fest, right? But I was writing weekly emails for them with stormwater compliance news, and we started to sort of bump up the funny in the emails, make a little joke about the news items here and there, put in a funny GIF or GIF, your preference. And then we polled the readers and we said, do you prefer just the facts or do you like these funnier emails? And 85% of people said, we like the funny ones. And then we killed the remaining 15%. So they're not on the list anymore.
Now, killed them quite metaphorically. I think that's probably a joke, right? But on the sprinkler supply store when we were prepping and
Yeah.
Mapistry, tell me those two examples as well.
Yeah. Sprinkler Supply Store is I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it's a wholesale. How do they describe themselves? A wholesale supplier of like sprinkler parts, So what you would need to do an in-ground irrigation system. And I worked on some abandoned cart emails for them. And normally, you have an e-commerce store, you turn on Shopify. Shopify has their generic abandoned cart email. You left this in your cart, Michael. Come back for 10% off. Just kidding. It's 20% off because we're afraid we're going to lose the sale. And it was like, okay, how could this be more fun? And we made up a character named Kyle. And so the first email was like, look, Kyle is crying right now. He's really upset that you abandoned your cart. He's new on the job. He really wants to impress his mom. If you could just do Kyle a solid and come back and finish checking out. And then we gradually ramped up how upset Kyle was by like email 3, like Kyle is under his desk. We are worried about him. Please finish checking out. It's for all of us.
That's
So like,
hilarious.
you
Okay.
never expect that from a landscaping company, right? And
Right.
they get replies all the time. Years later, people reply to the abandoned carts and they're like, this is great.
What about Mapistry?
Oh, yeah. Mapistry was the one that the environmental compliance software that
Got it.
we
Okay.
polled the readers. And
Got
I
it.
recently actually did a landing page for them. They came up with this concept. I love them for this called Retire Spreadsheets.
Mhm.
Like we're using Mapistry. We're not using spreadsheets. We're throwing spreadsheets a retirement party. And so I wrote a landing page at retirespreadsheets.com that was like, we're going to take your spreadsheets out behind the barn and you know what's going to happen to them. And like, press this button to kill a spreadsheet. And so super fun, weird page that still brought forth the benefits of the platform.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you've kind of hinted a little bit at some of this, but let's assume that I want to start adding funny into my copy somehow, some way. So let's just break down, where do I start? Let's just assume I've never done it before, or the person that's listening has never done it before. And let's just kind of get down to fundamentals. Like, what do we need to think about? What's the first things we need to be doing? And you alluded at some things earlier. We can expand on those if you want to.
Yeah. I sort of mentioned like getting curious about your own sense of humor. I think that's a really important place to start. figuring out what you think is funny. And there are 5 broad categories of humor that can help to sort of categorize yourself. So there's like wholesome and goofy, and this is where cat memes live. This is where people falling down but not getting hurt, and like funny animals live. There's lowbrow and crass, which is where you get your poop and sex humor. There's highbrow and intellectual. So you have to have some prior knowledge to get the joke. This is where like language jokes come in, or math jokes. There is dark and morbid, so like Wednesday Addams style. And then there's absurd and surreal. And most people have a blend of a higher percentage of one and then a few others. Like nobody's all wholesome or all absurd. But this is a good sort of categorization to start doing of the humor that you like, that you gravitate to.
So, okay, this is where it gets kind of intriguing. Let's say I work for a company, which so many people do, and how do I get, maybe let's just say I'm into goofy and wholesome, because that's the easy one to pick.
Most easily accessible, yeah.
How do I even, don't I have to like go up the chain to people inside? You know what I mean? Just because I'm thinking my humor might not be what the brand's humor is.
That is important for sure. This is why I love working with founder-led brands, because there's not that distinction, right? But if you are creating a sense of humor for a brand, you can do the same kind of exercise. And you can also ask, how do we want the copy to make people feel? This is a question that we miss a lot, especially in conversion copy. It's like, what do we want them to do? How are they going to convert? Where are they going next? But like, how do we want to make them feel along the way? Is there anything in the copy, especially around like where they might be a little anxious, where we could make a joke to sort of relax them a little bit? So there are ways to sell it to your higher ups as a strategy, and say, we'll start it just a little bit at a time. We're not going to go like full rebrand, or we'll start with a campaign, not, in the brand itself.
Okay. So what I heard you say so far is, get curious with your own sense of humor.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there's 5 different categories: wholesome and goofy, lowbrow and crass, highbrow and intellectual, dark and morbid, and what was the last one? Surreal and
absurd and surreal. That's
absurd.
Like the can I get really nerdy for a second here?
Yeah, go for it.
There's a theory of humor psychology called incongruity resolution, which attempts to explain how we process jokes in the brain. We basically hear a joke, there's something that's not fitting with it, and our brain is trying to figure out the answer. And we go one way, and the answer is unexpected, and then the punchline is there, and we're surprised and delighted, and we laugh, right? Because it's not what we were expecting. Incongruity, like if we end up the other way and there is no answer, that's where absurd and surreal humor lives. And then we're laughing at ourselves for expecting a punchline. So it's just like, have you seen Garfield without Garfield? Or was it Garfield minus Garfield?
No.
They just erase Garfield from all the Garfield comic strips, and it turns into this sort of existential, like John just talking to himself into the void. And it's sad and weird and absurd.
Very interesting. So, okay, now we're back to exploring our own sense of humor. Some people might not necessarily know what their sense of humor is. And you kind of mentioned earlier that there's ways we can kind of get to it. And I think you said something along the lines of who makes you laugh, right? So talk to us a little bit about where do we go like to self-identify which of these categories our humor falls into?
Pay attention to your comfort shows. Pay attention to who's, I don't know, if you go out to see comedy, whose shows you're buying tickets for. Think about what you thought was funny when you were a kid. Could be comic strips or books. What kind of email lists are you on? What kind of brands do you like to buy from because they make you feel good? And then go look in all of those places and see, are they making jokes that are self-deprecating? Are they making jokes about what we all see in the world around us, which we can totally get to, observational humor and self-deprecating humor if you want to. Are they being offensive to me, like Cards Against Humanity style? I like to say that there's this spectrum of humor. A lot of people think you're either funny or you're not, like on or off. But it's actually a dial or a spectrum. And if you're not watching the video, I'm holding my hands apart in front of me like football goals. And Cards Against Humanity is all the way on one side, right? Like, not all of us want to make Holocaust jokes. Most of us don't, right? And then over here you have really corporate and boring. And most people could just bump it up a little bit and be a little warmer, more wholesome and goofy, and without risking ever going into that scary territory.
Yeah, when we were prepping for this, I mentioned to you there's a guy named Sebastian Maniscalco, I think is his
Yeah.
name,
Yeah.
that my wife and I find hilarious. And most of his comedy is talking about him traveling through airports or just in everyday kind of environments and commenting about the absurdity of the things that we have to do. Now, that I don't even know where would that kind of comedy fall? Would that fall under wholesome and goofy, or is it more absurd, or where would you even classify something like that?
I would say it's sort of wholesome and goofy. I went and watched a couple of his clips actually,
Yeah,
because he's observing what's around us and he's
right,
making fun of it in a way that puts him on our side.
right,
Sort of, it's like affiliation based humor. It makes us feel safe. It makes him feel safe. We can laugh together at this outside thing.
right.
Yeah, so I would put that in wholesome because it's not offensive to anyone. No one's getting hurt. Maybe the people that he makes fun of, but
Yeah,
they'll never see it, right? And even the clips that I saw, he was actually complimenting someone that he was joking about. So
yeah.
very,
He,
very
he
uplifting.
he's
Yeah.
pretty funny, and he uses a lot of interesting voices when he uses his comedy. Where
Yeah.
do we put the humor into the funnel? Like if we think about the various stages and stuff,
Yeah.
because it's one thing to figure out where we might identify with our style of humor, but it's another thing to actually be thinking about like where we would use it.
Yeah. I have a rule of thumb, which is anywhere you have more of a personal connection with a reader, you can use more humor. So like emails, some social media posts. If you're talking to them one on one and it could just be you two in the room, that's a good place to try a joke. I usually stay away from it in like hero sections and homepages because it's so hard to explain who you are, what you do, and who you do it for and why they should care in like the 0.5 seconds you have for someone to read your headline on your homepage that like most people get that wrong. So it's better not to complicate that. But in general, like emails are great.
You
I
said,
was going to say something
yeah,
else. Can you
go
ask the
ahead.
question again?
Yeah, no. The question was about where to use it in the funnel, and you were saying emails, but what else were you going to say? Do you remember where
Oh
you were
yeah,
going?
of course. Anywhere you want to build more of a relationship, or you want to sort of turn the pressure valve down and ease some of their anxiety.
Mm,
And you have to be pretty strategic about this because you do want them to be anxious and lead and take action, right? You want them to convert. You need a certain amount of anxiety around conversion. So you don't want to just like make them feel like everything's great. You read the page, good job, you can go now. You want, you still want to engineer a little bit of that anxiety, but you can make jokes around objections that people have in the copy in this very affiliative way. Like, haven't you noticed that like it's so hot in Texas, your packages are all melting by the time you pick them up off the porch. This is a true story from this morning. Like, I hate when that happens. Here is this solution that we made. It's a package cooler, lives
mm,
outside your mailbox. And
got
so
it.
it feels it feels like funny in a way that serves the conversion.
Okay, so here's what we've talked about so far. Find where you know, explore your own past and explore your own kind of humor and kind of figure out what you personally find funny. And then the obvious places to put humor to work are in places where ideally you're sending an email to an individual that they could reply to. And the examples of email make the most amount of sense to me, and maybe on your social profiles where you can interact with people. Um,
Yeah.
and then as far as like coming up with the humor, let's talk about putting humor to work, right? Because I think it's one thing to conceptually talk about being funny and use it in these different places, but
Mhm.
but where do we actually exercise this at a fundamental level? Like how do we actually put it to work, I guess is what I'm asking.
Like on a sentence level?
Anyway, I mean like, let's just say that it might be natural for you to to just be funny everywhere, but like where do I inject humor? I mean specifically, yeah, where do I inject humor?
Yeah.
How do I go about doing that?
I think the easiest way to start is by writing the copy quote unquote straight. Like write your emotion backed, research backed copy the way that you normally would.
Mhm.
And then read it out loud and pretend that you're talking to a friend and like converse with the copy. See if you have any impulses to like, make a joke or like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge aside. See if you also identify like missing connective tissue when you read your copy out loud. Like,
Hmm.
oh, those points don't actually connect to each other. I should write something there. That could be a good spot for a joke. Um, I sometimes get people who are worried they're going to go too like whole hog with it. There's the people who are really worried about starting and they don't want to start at all. And then there's the people who are like, everything I'm writing is a stupid joke and now I can't convert anymore. And so my rule of thumb is aim for no more than one joke per paragraph and always cut the joke if it's getting in the way of the conversion.
Okay, I like that. What about the certain, when I think about copy and you think about copy, there are usually, the basics of copy is problem resolution, right? So where do we inject humor? At the problem side, at the resolution side, at both sides of it? Like this, let's just kind of explore that a little bit creatively together,
Yeah. I love injecting it in the problem side.
Okay.
Because it's like, this problem sucks. It's like, and then you have hopefully a hilarious metaphor, the more specific, the better. Then, keep going with the agitation, get to the solution. And then in the solution, you can address any concerns that people have. Like, I know you're thinking that I'm going to steal your credit card information and run off screaming into the night. But in fact, we have 256-bit encryption or whatever, the standard, whatever people like to say around credit cards. Is that making sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it is. Let's go ahead and let's do an example. Let's pick something. I'll let you pick the example. But let's pick the example, or I can pick the example, whatever is easier. If you prefer, I pick the example. I'm gonna pick something on my desk.
Pick something. Yeah.
Okay. I have this soda on my desk called Zevia. Okay. And it's a no calorie, natural. It's alternative to Coke because it doesn't have any sugar, but it also doesn't have any artificial anything. It's flavored by Zevia. It's clear. It tastes like Coke, but it's healthy. So the problem is that I don't want artificial sweeteners. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I love drinking cold drinks that have caffeine so it can keep me awake while I'm working.
Yeah.
So how can we make this funny?
Well, the thing that immediately came up for me is that your fear is that it's not going to be as good as Coke, right?
Yes.
You want a no artificial sweetener, 0 calorie drink to keep you awake that doesn't taste like, 10 raccoons decomposing on top of a landfill.
Yeah. Or poisonous concoction of stinky nastiness. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, it's not as, but yeah, all the fears of, it's going to taste horrible or it's going to, that's the biggest thing, right? I don't want to try something that's not going to taste good.
I would sort of, I would brainstorm a bunch of different angles around like, is there a guilt aspect for some people who don't want the extra sugar, but they want the pick me up?
Right.
Is there fear about the amount of caffeine in it, making you feel like you've just been punched in the heart by Thor?
Right.
Right. And everywhere I'm going, I'm trying to come up with a really specific end. You notice how the funny piece is usually at the end of the sentence because we're geared to wait for that. We're like looking for the ending. We're expecting, we're trying to fill it in. The more specific and unexpected it can be, the funnier it is. And I'm not saying that like punched in the heart by Thor.
And by the way, where the humor could be is on the alternative, right? Like, are you concerned that when you're dead, they're going to find so much aspartame in your body that,
right.
that it's going to, are you concerned that it'll flood your entire system, or you just take all the fears really on the alternative side of this stuff that you've been drinking. Are you addicted? I mean, that I don't know if we can make that funny, but the fear of like drinking the alternative, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what if there was a better solution that didn't taste horrible and wasn't like coffee and wasn't like nasty tasting tea? I don't know. Is that funny? Is that an angle we could go with, or is that too direct?
You brought up aspartame, which I think is a really interesting idea because people are really polarized about that.
Yeah.
And sometimes brands are worried about taking a stand, especially when there's like ongoing research.
Right.
And so this would be a fun place to walk the line. Like, regardless of whether you think aspartame is totally harmless, unless you're 50 lab rats being fed 1,000 milligrams a day,
there you go.
Or you think aspartame is the literal juice of the devil or whatever, you can avoid it just to be safe.
There you go.
Sort of ride that line.
Yeah. Or are you concerned about giving up one of your favorite tastiest beverages?
Yeah.
And the alternatives are just nasty. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to have to drink coffee. I mean, is there a way you can, I don't know. I mean, where were you going to go with that?
Well, this is where I think everyone should take improv because it strengthens your if this then what brain.
Yeah.
So like if you've already given up everything else and your life has become this boring beige parade of monotony, you need one treat and you can feel good about this treat.
Yeah, and you
You know?
don't want to have to carry around liquid caffeine and drop it inside your water, right?
Right.
Something along those lines. I mean, I don't even know if such a thing exists. Or you
Oh,
don't
it
want to
does.
take those. You don't want to take those tablets that make your entire body shake because there's so much caffeine in them, right? Just so you
Right,
can
right.
get your can. You just want to sip your caffeine in a way that tastes really yummy. You know?
Yeah. And there's so okay, so like I'm gonna get nerdy again. There are so many ways you could take that shaking idea in both a wholesome direction. So like, shaking harder than a well, this isn't wholesome. I was gonna say baby in a centrifuge. That's not wholesome anymore.
No.
But there are there are like you can go in a wholesome direction, things
Yeah,
that
well,
shake.
you could say shaking like someone holding a jackhammer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shaking like you're on the business end of a jackhammer,
Yeah.
and if you want to go the dark and absurd route, shaking like you are withdrawing from alcohol, or
Or you're on an airplane that's clearly hit turbulence,
right.
something along those lines,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So there's all these different directions to take that same joke idea,
Right.
and you can choose the one or the blend of them that fits the brand.
And then, you said that you should inject humor ideally in every paragraph. So, we just took the example of how to inject the humor in the front end of introducing the problem, which is all these alternatives um, to Coke, or Pepsi. But then when we actually introduce the solution, how do we continue to impute humor, if you will, into the messaging? Because it's one thing to just
Yeah,
introduce it into the problem, but how do we do it in every paragraph like you're talking about? Like
it's
let's
usually
just say, and I'll add a little bit more. Let's just say that you can buy direct by the case.
yeah.
Let's say we're buying direct by the case, and then let's just say also shipping is not a problem. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And we can inject humor into the various stages of this.
Yeah. I mean, if we can assume that we've already sort of convinced them to buy this product, the humor comes along and does like the mopping up of fears and objections and concerns, right? So, like, you can buy it by the case. If you're worried that it's going to take up too much room in the pantry, it's not because it'll get drunk really fast.
There you go.
Yeah.
It'll disappear faster than you realize, something along those
Yeah.
lines,
So
right?
anything that people like, any last few questions that people have before buying, which if you're doing any kind of conversion research, you probably know.
Yeah.
And then you can show at that point that the brand has a sense of humor about itself. And we talked about like frequency of funny in copy. I think if you're just starting out, just make it a little reward. You don't have to do every paragraph. It's not a hard and fast rule, but reward the people who are reading closely. Reward the people that read the body copy and don't just scan the headlines. Reward the people who read the photo captions, which is most people, and the copy under the button. That's one of my favorite spots to sort of like, hey, a human was here. A funny person that will give your money back if you are sad was here.
Let's go to a different example. Let's say that you are a professional copywriter, okay? And let's just say that you're trying to persuade people not to just use AI to produce their
Mm,
copy, okay? But to instead hire a human who can do it a lot better. And let's say some of your biggest fears are it's going to cost a fortune and it's going to take forever to work with that person. So I'm
mhm.
just throwing that out there. And I'm probably dealing with objections I'm sure you've dealt with as a copywriter. So how could we inject humor into the product, which in this case is a service where you're
Mhm.
selling your time, where you're a professional copywriter, and how can we address some of the objections of using AI versus having it be really costly? Because I'm sure that everyone who's listening has these kind of, whether you're a marketing
Yeah.
consultant or anything else, these are all examples a lot of my audience is dealing with that are in the services
Yeah.
side of things.
Well, the immediate thing that comes to mind is like, how expensive would it be to have it done poorly with AI and have that terrible copy up on your site for months before you realize that it's not converting versus just paying an expert right now, you know?
Right. Well, and we can go further and to later realize that the copy was completely wrong because you didn't spot check it
Right.
and AI hallucinated about some facts about your business or your service that aren't even relevant, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
If you wanted to go like the offensive to reader route, you could say like, Sure, if you think your business is just like every other business out there, then AI can do a great job because all it can do is what's out there. If you're just cookie cutter and you want cookie cutter copy,
Right.
but that's
Right.
obviously a little dangerous.
No,
Because
but
we
it's
can
not.
be outdated.
It's that's good. Obviously I like the angle you were going specifically with the idea of costliness and the objection of opportunity loss almost, right? So it's kind of a would you rather, right? Would you rather go for the easy route that may get you a fair amount of conversions, or go for the high route that can get you lots of conversions? But then how do you actually work comedy into that, I guess, is the question, right?
I mean, it's like, would you rather become a prompt engineer and you could mock up some really dorky looking person, like nobody wants to have a drink with this guy? Would you rather waste hours of your life shrieking at ChatGPT because it doesn't understand what you're asking it and become a prompt engineer? Or would you rather run your business, do what you're good at, hire someone to do what they're good at, and get a good result?
I like that. That's really good. And even we could work comedy into the latter part of it if we wanted to, right? Get a good result
Mm.
while addressing, while having plenty of free time to go golf or whatever else you need to do, right? Without the
Yeah.
pain side of it.
Or
I don't know.
get copy that makes your readers feel like they're snorting cocaine on top of a pile of cookies or so. I don't know. You can tell my personal brand of humor always leans like real, but there are
That's cool.
ways to make it more wholesome, right?
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about observational humor versus self-deprecation and all that fun stuff, because you hinted to that earlier, and I want people to just understand what that means and how that works.
Yeah, so these are the two sort of fail-safe humor styles that I recommend, especially when people are starting out. We talked about how observational humor makes fun of, like, points out something weird that's going on in the world. This is a question that we use in improv a lot, which is, what's the one weird or unusual thing that's happening? And that becomes the game of the scene. That becomes what the entire scene is built around. So, think Jerry Seinfeld going, what's the deal with airplane food? And it's not anything you've ever really thought about before, but the moment you have this microscope on it, you realize how weird it is. And this is, I think, what you like about Sebastian Maniscalco. He sort of blows up these tiny moments of daily life and finds the funny in them. So that's one thing that I
Yeah,
think is really safe to do.
let's pause on that for a second. So if we look at our industry, everybody who's listening right now,
Hmm.
we could probably ideate on some things that are just kind of messed up about the way the industry typically operates, right?
Yeah.
And that could be the observational humor that might attract a certain audience to us. I don't know how we would do that, but where would we even look for something
Oh,
like that?
such a good question. Look for things that make you feel strongly. What do you love about your work and hate about your work?
Mm,
What just came up for me was like, do you hate the 1,000 faceless crypto bros popping into your inbox all the time, trying to get you to pay them to make videos? Or like,
I like
yeah, I
that.
do. What do you hate about your industry? And can we sort of poke fun at that? As
Yeah.
long as we're not as long as we're not punching down, right?
Well, what does that mean?
So punching down is where you make fun of someone with, less status or reach or power than you, basically.
Mm.
Um, you can poke fun at entities with more power, like the RNC, right? Like the Republican National Committee. I can make fun of them pretty safely. I would not necessarily make fun of a grassroots political candidate in my small town because they don't have that much power, and it would just be seen as cruel.
Okay, that's intriguing. So what I'm hearing you say is that you could take some big behemoth entity that perhaps everybody has to work with. So, for example, in the world of marketing, everybody tends to work with Google
Mhm.
and or Microsoft, right? So
Yeah.
you could find something that everybody struggles with, and you could say like, what in the world, or Facebook for that matter, right? Like
Yeah.
Facebook's
Oh,
a great
yeah.
example.
Great
How
scapegoats.
hard is it to act? Why in the world is it so hard for the world's largest social platform to get support? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and you
Aren't we
could,
all on it? Don't you
yeah,
think some of the people using Facebook could help me with Facebook?
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's where if you're selling something where you have inside insights into how to use Facebook so you can bypass that ridiculously challenging dead end up, where you throw your hands up and run away crying kind of
Yeah.
situation. That's where I see, okay, got it. That's observational humor, where you're finding something that everybody generally can resonate with. And
Yeah.
another
Exactly.
example, it might be the algorithms, right? I mean, like, why is it that we create all this amazing content and no one ever sees it unless we pay
Yeah.
money, right? And that's where we could start positioning the algorithms, right, as this horrible thing that just is designed to make the life of marketers an impossible hell, right?
Yeah. And you're doing something right now, also from improv called heightening, where you take this bad thing and you make it worse and worse and worse and worse until, we are making sacrifices to the algorithm and like dressed in all black and there are candles burning. And it's like, please, almighty algorithm, boost my content. It starts out with a simple post and like, and then it elevates itself all the way to this crazy, totally unrealistic scenario.
I like this discussion because I think that everybody can apply this
Yeah.
to almost any niche that they're in. What about self-deprecation? Talk to me about that, because not everybody even really understands how to do that. I
Yeah.
clearly don't. So why does that work, and how do we even do that in such a way? Because there's probably a fine line, on
Oh,
how you
yes.
do that.
There is a line for sure. Actually, they've measured the line. You have felt this in person, I guarantee. When someone makes fun of themselves and you chuckle and then they keep going and they're like, and also my wife hates me and my dog died, and you're like, "Oh my God, John, like stop." It
Yeah.
gets really uncomfortable, right? So there is a line. Self-deprecation, you have to sort of know yourself, right? You have to be able to laugh at yourself first and very aptly describe the thing about you that's funny. So, if you have no self-awareness, this may not be right for you. But it can be as simple as like, hey, Michael, I know you get 5,000 emails a day and I'm not important enough to be the only one that you read, but I hope I'm important enough to be the one that you really love.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting. So what do we look for when we're thinking about employing self-deprecation? Like, what do we choose to pick to essentially minimize, if you will, in a joke?
Yeah. I would say stay away from physical traits. It tends to make people uncomfortable unless it's a temporary thing. I
Right.
once made a joke. I walked out on stage and I was wearing a green dress and leggings and boots and a big like amulet. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm dressed like Link from Legend of Zelda." And the auditorium was like, "Oh my God, she is," but I could
Got it.
change my clothes, right? So
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily be like, "My nose is terrible," because it's like, oh, well, she has to live with it. And I guess we do too. So yeah, temporary appearance things, um, ticks that you tend to have. A lot of writers make fun of themselves for overusing the M dash, right?
Okay.
Uh, yeah. So just like notice your own patterns.
Is that
And
fair to use is that an example of a good example or a bad example?
that's a great example.
Oh yeah. Okay,
There's
cool.
a lot of M dash memes in the copywriting world where it's like, don't take away my emotional support M dash. It's like someone clinging to it.
Right, right, right. Okay, got
Yeah.
it. Okay. So when we're thinking about self-deprecating humor, what we're really thinking about is the silly little things that we do, that we're aware that we do, that others are aware that we do, that we can use in the humor in such a way that it's not going to necessarily offend anybody. Is that what
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say?
Yes. Things that we do in general and things that we're doing right now in the copy. Like, I know I'm asking you to give me your credit card.
Mm,
Um, and I know that that's uncomfortable, right? Like, whatever you're doing in the copy, you can say, "Hey, I also see that this is happening." And like, I wouldn't trust me either, but you should, you know?
got it. Got it. What do we do if our humor doesn't seem to work? And how do we even know, by the way? Because if you don't have a live
Oh, yeah.
audience, you don't really know, right?
Yeah. Well, you'll get feedback. You'll get some emails. And my challenge is don't let that one squeaky wheel be the thing that keeps you from trying, right?
Mhm.
Because the people who respond to emails or any copy with deep offense probably weren't the right people for that copy anyway. And it's sort of better often if they show themselves out. If you start offending your actual target audience, that's when you need to recalibrate because something is not going right. And I just return to like, oh, okay, what is funny to you? What would you like to see?
Yeah.
What kind of content do you want to see from me? And then they tell me the topics and the sort of areas they want to hear from me. And I'm like, okay, how can I make this funny?
Very, very cool. Um, Leanna Patch, if people want to discover more about you because maybe they are more interested in working with you because you are funny and they don't feel like they're so funny,
Yeah.
where can they connect with you on the social platforms, and where do you want to send them if they want to possibly hire you to do some work with them?
Oh, I would love to meet and talk to everybody. I am aggressively on social media at Punchline Copy across most platforms, and I'm also at punchlinecopy.com.
Awesome. Leanna, thank you so much for coming on the show and answering my questions about humor. We
Yeah, thank you
are
so much.
hopefully more willing to give it a shot as a result of some of the things you share with us today.
That's the dream. Thanks so much, Michael.